the two responses of the king happen in the field. They happen in the field, but it's all happening before you and I do anything relative to actually going to see the king. Right? It's all a response to our desire to see the king, even though we haven't necessarily gone to see the king. So therefore, we answered our question as to why it is the response to our Ani L'Dodi happens in the field. It's not a response to our Ani L'Dodi. It comes before our Ani L'Dodi. Kalman, you're way down there today.
No.
Okay, no, I'm just nervous. It's all right. I can handle it. Okay, right? So the response to the key to our Ani L'Dodi can still be in the palace, because we haven't done Ani L'Dodi yet, and yet there's this tremendous event of Mekabeles and B'Sever Panim Yafes and Marlem Panim Seichakes, right? Okay, that's what we said yesterday. Now that's going to obviously bring up a problem, which we've noticed already, that Elul is becoming more and more a notion of hisarus, arousal from above, and less, or I shouldn't say less and less in Nesinas Kayach, but adrabah, less and less only Nesinas Kayach. There's a lot of hitarut happening in Elul, it seems, right? Arousal from above, inspiration from above. So we're hanging on by our fingernails to the quality of Ani L'Dodi, and then V'Dodi Li. It seems Dodi Li, which is the Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim, which is this incredible event of Mekabel and Mare, and then Ani L'Dodi. That's the last thing the Rebbe told us. It arouses in us an appreciation of who we really are, and that we want to be by our beloved King. It's all coming from above. So that's Vav. Let's see. Tzarech Lahavin. Have to understand. You know, Rava used to start, it's not exactly a milsa de b'dichusa, a joke, but it's cute and funny. Rava used to start, Rava in the Gemara, right? Rava and Abaye. Rava used to start every class with a joke. The Gemara says he used to start, I can't see Rava telling jokes, but anyway, evidently he told a joke. He used to tell a joke at the beginning of every class, and then it would say Rabbanan Badchi, they would laugh, and they'd learn Torah b'simcha. Right? Amazing. Rava telling jokes. Right? What the jokes were, I don't know. But I'm sure they were good jokes. But this isn't a joke, it's just a cute thing. I just this morning on the family WhatsApp, so our 6-year-old grandson in Australia is, learning how to write and spell and all that. So they're on online school. So so his mother was asking him, okay, what have you got to tell me? So he said, CLASS space IS space OVA. Class is over. He's Australian, right? There's no R in Australia. It's just that class is over. No one said class is over. OVA. So I guess that's how you spell it in Australia. Class is over. So now he's on his way to the park. No, not the park. I'm sorry, the park. He's on his way to the park. Tzarech lahavin. The mihanal muvan. From this it's understood. Shagilu Elul. The revelation of Elul. Who loyrak nasinas kayach lavaita. Right? Now, do you remember way back when we were all much younger, the very beginning of the Maamer, the first time the Rebbe talked about Elul, he talked about hisarus and nasinas kayach. Remember? And I kept saying, why does he put in the word hisarus? Don't worry, it'll become clear later in the Maamer. And after that, immediately after, 4 times within the next 2 paragraphs, the Rebbe tells us it's not a hisarus, it's only a nasinas kayach. But the first time the Rebbe mentions it, he says hisarus and nasinas kayach. It's an arousal and an empowerment. Right? Do you remember that? Anyway, well, here it is. This is why the Rebbe said what he said there, and then negated it completely for the rest of, until now. Now that we've explained things the way we explain things, we see it's really taka hisarus. So we have to explain so then how is it still Ani L'Dodi? It's not only in the sinus kayach. It's not only an empowerment. Dikisha melech besada, and what does that mean? That when the melech is in the field, yeshna reshus v'yechilas, everybody has the permission and the ability, l'kol echad lahakbil ispanav, to receive him, to go see him, which would be pshat if it weren't for the responses of the king of Mekabel and Mara, and what we now know that means. Ella, gam ba'eres adam. It arouses in us a desire to go see the king, a greater desire than we have at any other time. By virtue of the fact that the king receives us all graciously, and the Rebbe said, the fact that the king receives our desire, accepts our desire to do tshuva graciously, gives us a greater koyach to overcome our obstacles. Right? That's the first thing the Rebbe told us yesterday. Ubefrat, and particularly, what we learned at the end yesterday, the fact that he shows this joyous and shining face to everybody. So that arouses in us to do tshuva. Tshuva shleima. And yet nevertheless, avodah Ani L'Dodi. Still Ani L'Dodi, v'Dodi li. You can't churn, the pasuk is the pasuk. Now, you could say, okay, the pasuk doesn't apply to Elul. Right? Okay, but there is a Rosh Tevis of Elul in the pasuk, Ani L'Dodi v'Dodi li, and the Alter Rebbe says that. So now we have to understand. So how does that work? Because it doesn't seem to be that it's all about our arousal from below producing a response from above. It seems to be, yes, you and I do something. We want to do tshuva. You do it yet, but we want to. Right? That arouses in a Kadosh Baruch Hu a desire. An appreciation of his essential love for us, which arouses in us the appreciation that our essential love is him, and that we want to be close to him. Right? Okay. Tshuva. Tshuva is about being close to the Eibishter. Right? Yes, okay, it means that I'm better, so to speak, meaning I'm doing better things. It's okay, that's true. But the ikar in tshuva is that it's about the Eibishter, not about me. Right? The closer we get to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the more our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu is about him and not about me, not about my religiosity, not about my spiritual upliftedness, just him. He gets what he wants. Why do we do that? Because he matters. One could add, the very fact that the revelation of Elul, who loy rak nasinas kayach, is not only an empowerment, elegam ba'erer. It's really astounding after everything we said in the whole Maamer. Muvan gam michlolasim de melech b'sada. This is understood by the general idea of melech b'sada. The king's in the field. Okay, what will that generally mean? Well, the Rebbe is going to say, the kashamelech b'sada. When the king's in the field, in addition, sha'az yesh l'kol echad reshus v'yechilas lahakbil es pnei melech. That even though, in addition to the fact that there is a permission and an ability of everybody to go greet the king when he's in the field, so that's true, and that's the nesinus kayach, right? That's the empowerment. He's there, he's accessible, which is what we've been saying up until now. Now the Rebbe says something which we sort of threw it out there. It was there, but we just, said we'll get to it later. Well, here it is. Hine hayediyah shala'am, the knowledge of the shamelechu besada, that the king is in the field, ba'isa makam shemnim soim, in the place where they're found, ma'erer etzlam, that arouses in them a ratzon lahakbel b'nei melech. The very fact that the king is in the field arouses in you and I a desire to go see the king, right? Which was something we didn't really understand in terms of the mashal. The king's in the field. Okay, now it's up to me to go see the king. Well, once I'm aware of the fact that the king's in the field, what am I going to want to do?
Visit him.
Yeah, the king's in the field. Right? A mashal, okay? I'm talking about this in the context before Gimel Tammuz, no miracles involved, nothing crazy, just, okay. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is there in 770, and he's coming to daven with us every day, and you see him, right? Okay, pre-Gimel Tammuz reality. You here, we're sitting here right now, and someone peeks their head in the door and says, Lubavitcher Rebbe is walking down Sterot Ben Tzvi. What happens?
Mad dash.
We dash, right? We're out of this room in a second, right? Oh, I have to think about it. I have to arouse in myself a desire to go see him. No, I'm out of the room in a minute, right? A minute, not a minute. Hopefully no one will get hurt at the door, right? True? I mean, that is what would happen.
What do you say about people whose response would be like,
okay, so if people don't if a person if so, right? I'm not picking on Americans. I'm just saying this because Americans are the ones who are less enchanted by the idea of kingship and sovereignty than just about any large group of people on earth. I understand why they threw that off. I get that, and they're really into that July 4th stuff. Okay, fine, I get it. There might be an American, if someone were to say the King of England is walking down the street, there might be an American in the room that goes, King of England. I'm an American, King of England. Okay. Most of us, what would we do? We'd probably walk out and go, oh, King of England, that's interesting. He's not even my king. Right, but I mean, I think I'd find that interesting, and I'd go look. If there, God forbid, if there were a traffic accident outside, most people would go out and look. Right? Okay, so certain events happen that arouse in a person a desire to go take part in that. Okay, so if the king is in the field, and the Rebbe is going to explain that there's very few people. If you're English and the king is in the field, you go. There is no such thing as okay. There's going to be a couple of crazy wackos who said, I'm anti-monarchy, and they're not going to go, and that'll be their going. They don't go, like those people who eat pork on Yom Kippur. That's their Yom Kippur. It's still Yom Kippur. They don't eat pork on Tuesday. They eat pork on Yom Kippur. Why? Because only Jews eat pork on Yom Kippur. That's their Jew. That's the Jew in them. I'm going to eat pork on Yom Kippur. Why would a non-Jew eat pork with dafka on Yom Kippur? What does he care? Right? Oh, okay. So that's very Jewish. And as much as he's trying to show I'm not into it, he's blaring to the world that he's a Jew. Okay, in a bizarre way. Okay, so there might be some Englishman who's blaring to the world that I'm not into the king and I'm not going to go. And we're going to say, oh, he must be English because no one, everybody else will go just, because why not? Right? Okay. So the Englishman's going to go.
Isn't there a fundamental difference between rubbernecking this important?
Yeah, okay, I brought that up as a joke, right? The king, we're talking about a king. That's
still,
not rubbernecking to go see a king. The Rebbe's going to explain. And honestly, this is the Rebbe's going to explain in the next paragraph why I'll go see the king. And I get it, and I'm not picking on America, honestly, but I get it. An American's not going to appreciate what a king is. That's exactly what David Hardocker said when he killed the Tsar. Now no one understands what a king is. If you're a subject of the king and the king's in the field, you go. I'm sorry. That's what it means that he's your king. Right? There's no such thing as not going. If he's the prime minister, I didn't vote for the vote. But if Bibi Netanyahu drove by and was stuck in traffic right here, everybody in the yeshiva would be standing out front. Maybe a couple of guys not because they want to be cool. I'm beyond this. Virtue signaling, how they're beyond. So, how many people would be out in the street? Most of the guys, right? Why? Well, I think he's the prime minister of the country. You've heard of him, right? You never saw him. He's stuck in traffic right in front of you, and he got out of the car and he's waving to people and talking to people and for bringing. So you're not going to go out. Some people won't. Most people are going to go out. Some people say, no, I'm not into it. Okay. But he's a democratically elected leader. That's completely different than a king. Now that I was going to explain what that means. And I do remember many times, but I remember one time in particular, driving back from Borough Park, last day that I was in America. So I used to go to Borough Park to buy those things that my wife wanted bought in my dollar rental car. And was driving along Parkside and took a left. And all the Bachrim from Ocean Avenue were running along the street. Why? Obviously, word had come out that the Rebbe was saying a sikha. The Rebbe was saying a sikha. Right? And so they heard, and after Mincha, the Rebbe, instead of just turning around and walking out of 770, turned around and walked up to the stender and started saying a sikha. So they were all running to 770. So as soon as I saw them, I realized what was going on, right? And opened the door, threw in as many buckham into the car as I could, and instead of going to where I was staying and drop off the packages and put them in the suitcase, so we drove straight to 770 and parked on the service road as close to 770 as we could get, and ran in there the end of the sikha. Right? Melech Besada, where were they going? The Rebbe's talking there. They leave yeshiva, run, and the Hanal of yeshiva tells them, go. You want to go. If no one picked them up, it's a good 15-minute run. It's not close, right? Okay, it's 5-10 minutes to Empire, and then they have to run around along Empire and up. It's a long way. Okay, they hope the Rebbe's going to talk for 20-25 minutes. They'll get the last 5-10 minutes, right? Huffing and puffing. These guys got lucky. I drove them in my fancy dollar rental car. Right? Kings in the field. V'yesh lemer bir b'zeh. Sha'rotzon shel ha'am la'akbas pnei hamelech. The desire of the people to see the king. Now, this is a real king. Hu mitzad etzem mitziusam is a function of the essence of their being. Why? Now, the Rebbe is talking about a physical king. This is the way kings work. Again, this is something very, very difficult for us. And that's exactly what David Hardaker said. When they killed the Tsar, we want to understand what a king is. Okay. But we can at least appreciate the fact that there was such a thing, there is such a thing, whatever. Right? Because what's the king? Because the king is connected to the essential existence of those people. The cave and Sham Melech hu alev shel kol ha'am. Since the king is the heart of all of the people. And the Rebbe is quoting the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. Lochein, therefore, he's kashrusam lamelech. Their connection to the king, who ba'atzem mitziyusam, is a function of the essence of their being. That's how they define themselves. They define themselves as a subject of a particular king. It's who they are, right? Okay. Now, there are people today who define themselves as citizens of a certain country, right? Okay. No, that's not at all in any way, shape, or form like the essential connection of a subject to a king. Okay, but they feel a very, very strong affinity to the place they live in, and they define themselves that way. Okay. That's a shadow of the idea of the relationship to a king, but at least, right? Not to make fun of Canadians, but Canadians tend to travel with a Canadian flag on something, whether it's a suitcase or their backpack. They're very, very careful to make sure there's a Canadian flag. Now, most of the time, why do they want a Canadian flag there?
People don't think they're American.
They don't want to be thought of as Americans, right? No, they're this little brother right next door. I'm one of them, right? They're the little brother next door. You're living next to this brother who's 6'8" and 7,000 pounds, and you're 5'2" and weigh 10 pounds, and you're trying to exert your own existence. It's a little rough. Okay. 51st state and all that stuff, right? So yeah, the Canadians all travel with this little flag on whatever they've got, right? But most of it is, I'm not an American. Okay. So, but that's just a very, very watered down expression. But people tend to be again, it's now it's looked down upon, but people tend to be somewhat patriotic in some sort of natural way, right? Most Americans are, right? It's not cool to be, but most Americans are, because most Americans aren't into being cool. Right? They're just who they are. They're just regular folk, right? What are Brits starting to do all of a sudden?
Raise the flag.
Out on the street waving the Union Jack. Why? Because they finally woke up to the fact that their country is being taken over, right? They're not so happy, right? Oh, Boker Tov. Boker Tov, it's 5 p.m, right? But okay, they're waving the flag, right?
You get arrested.
What?
They get arrested.
Oh, you get arrested for waving the flag?
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Because it offends people.
Come on. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Some
They've arrested a couple people for
Wow.
disqualifying.
Oh, wow. Okay. Say El Shemikol Makim. So that the king, there's an essential connection of the subject to the king. And again, we see a very, very, very watered down, faint expression of that, of people's connection to their country. But it's not at all like someone's connection to their monarch in the real sense of the term. Right? If there's a real king or queen. Ella, Shemikol Makim, Kasher Melech V'am Heim B'richuk Makim. But when the Melech and the Am are distant from each other, Efshar, it's possible, she's Kashu Shalem LaMelech, that their connection to the king, Ubamela Gam HaRatzon Shalahem, and also, and consequently also, their desire, Lahakbil is Panav, to go see the king, Yebehelim, it'll be concealed. Not necessarily thinking about the king all day. The king's their king, and they're very, very powerfully connected to the king, but they're busy. They're doing their life, so they're not thinking about the king necessarily. But what happens? But the Melech shows up where they are. They get very excited. In the place where they're found, now their Ratzon is revealed. What Ratzon? They're real. They're the Ratzon that was always there. It was just hidden. It was hidden. Why? It's buried under all the other stuff that's happening in Elam Hazeh. Elam Hazeh is a loud place, makes a lot of noise. So it might bury temporarily certain desires that I have for certain things that are very, very natural and very, very much part of who I am. Okay, but every now and then those things will be aroused. And what will arouse in me a desire to see the king? The king shows up where I am. Now the Rebbe's he's talking in the mashal. He's not talking in the nimshal yet. He's talking in the mashal. Right? So people will flock to go see the king. Right? And they do. They do. Right? And when the King of Spain went to Wimbledon to watch one of his subjects play the final, it was the first thing that subject mentioned when he was interviewed after the match. I don't know whether he won or lost, but the first thing he said was the honor that Your Majesty is here. That's what he said. He had just played, he must sort of think a lot about tennis, right? Because he made it to the finals of Wimbledon. That means that's all you think about all day long. That's all you do. That's all you eat. That's all you drink. That's all you sleep. That's all, right? That's everything you do, right? When my brother was 15 years old, he had a tennis lesson with someone named Pancho Segura, who was the tennis coach of another 15-year-old named Jimmy Connors, who you might have heard of, right? Okay. So my brother was a lefty, and they were hitting back. I was standing there. I was 9. I was standing there watching, and Pancho Segura was hitting up with him and giving him tips on things, and then Pancho Segura hit a shot and ran, whatever, up to the net, right? And my brother hit a backhand, passed him at the net, landed this far from the line. Pancho Segura looked, said, no 15-year-old ever did that to me. At the end, I remember the conversation. I was listening. He talked to my brother and my parents. He said to my brother, you want to be the best tennis player in the world? He said, yeah. He said, do you want to give up everything to do that? He said, no. Because he was smart enough. Right? So he said, okay, go have a good time. You want to be the best tennis player in the world? You're going to give up everything else in your life to be the best tennis player in the world. Okay. The best tennis player in the world, or one of them, right? What was the first thing on his mind when he finished the most important tennis tournament in the world, which he had been dreaming about since he was 6 years old? Was the first thing he said. He thanked the king for being in the audience. It's really interesting, right? He didn't thank his mother. He did later, I assume. What struck me was he thanked the king. No, he was like completely blown away that the king of Spain also isn't much of a king, right? Whatever, however it works over there. We just don't get what a king is. Chassidim get it by their Rebbe, because that's all they talk about, right? Okay, and people get upset. Why talk about the Rebbe all the time? So now we have a problem. So isn't the very fact that the king is in the field, I mean, this paragraph explains the paragraph before, right? The explanation of the fact that the presence of the king in the field will arouse in this subject the desire to go see the king is because the king is the etzem metzias of this person. That's how he defines himself. Right? Okay. Now we're in the analog. She's utterus l'tshuva, the desire to do tshuva, habal yedei gilu yudgim u'midas arachmim shebe'elul, that comes as a result of the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy and Elul. Now we're going to have to explain what is we've pushed this to the side long enough. What does it mean really in real terms? What does it mean that there's a revelation of Yud Gim Mitzvah Rachmim and Elul, and how does that arouse in you and I a desire to go see a Kadosh Baruch Hu? What's that really all about? I get the mushal of the king in the field. That I get. What's that? What's the nimshal? What's the analog of that? Okay, now the Rebbe is going to explain that. Habal yedei gilu Yud Gim Mitzvah Rachmim shebe Elul hu shall yedei gilui the Yud Gim Mitzvah Rachmim, through the revelation of this level of godly reality that a Kadosh Baruch Hu allows to be revealed in our midst, now, in Elul, Misgala, it's revealed, Harotzen Apnimi de Yisrael, the inner desire of a Jew, just like the king in the field reveals the inner desire of the subject to go see the king. How this works, the Rebbe is going to explain it to us. This is also understood by that which is explained behemshech Maamer, in the continuation of the Maamer in Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe. After the mashal of Melech B'Sadeh, the Rebbe starts explaining the Yud Gim Mitzvah Rachmim. Now, Hashem kel rachum v'chanan, right? That's the Yud Gim Mitzvah Rachmim. Now there are different ways. There's 13 of them. How are there 13? So some people count Hashem as two. In Chassidus, we do not. Hashem are two different levels transcendent of that, right? And then the first meed of the 13 is Kel Melech, right? Okay, Kel Rachum V'Chanan. Okay, so Kel. So the Rebbe is going to explain Kel, because when we understand the first of something, we understand all of it, because the first is the repository of the energy that spreads to the whole rest of the whatever reality we're talking about. That's why we celebrate Rosh Hashanah so powerfully, Rosh Chodesh so powerfully. Right? One of the few times we celebrate the end of something is called Shabbos. We celebrate the beginning more than the end. The Shem Kel, who Reishis Kol Yud Gim Midas Rachmim. The Rebbe's not going to explain. So what is Shem Kel? Okay, there is a footnote that we have to go back a little. I'm sorry. Look at footnote 25, just in terms of what we were just learning. All right. When the Rebbe was talking about the presence of the king in the field arouses in the subject the desire to go see him. So I'm sorry, I forgot to read the footnote. This is an important footnote. Ubefrat, particularly al yedei yizbeinus, when the subject contemplates shekavanas hamelech, the intention of the king, b'yiridase l'sodeh, in his descent into the field, who bichdei is in order, shegam anshe asodeh, that also the people of the field yuchlu lahak v'lispanev are able to greet him. Why is the king in the field? He just happened, his car broke down in the field, like the mushal, we use a BB outside? No. The king is in the field because he wants to see me. So that arouses even more powerfully a desire for me to go see the king. He doesn't just happen to be in the field because he's passing through. No, he's coming to the field. That's where he wants to be. And for this purpose, he's mevater, right? He forgoes the revelation, his revelation of the crown of his kingship and the garments of his kingship. Meaning he leaves his palace where he's in all his glory and comes down to the field. And when he's in the field, we talked about earlier, what's he wearing? Oh, a suit. Right? He's dressed like everybody else. Shal yedei zeh, through this contemplation, yis'arer od yoser, it's aroused even more. Kamayim apanim lapanim, like a face in water, with the if someone shows me positive energy, my natural response is to show positive energy back, and also, unfortunately, negative. When I appreciate the fact that the king came to where he is in order to be with me, that gives me a greater desire to go see the king. He's not just here because he happens to be passing through. He's here because this is where he wants to be. Okay, so that's very, very powerful. So what's kel? The shame kel who reishis kol yud gimel midasim umekaran, their source, v'chlalusan, and their general reality. It's all incorporated in kel, and from there it emanates out. So what's shame kel? The inyan shame kel who or ein seif baruch hu is infinite godly light. Kamesha Kosuf. We'll talk about this, don't worry, but just see the words. Kel Havaya V'ya'er lanu. And he will illuminate to us. Let's just read a little further and we'll come back and try to understand something about this. Sha'or hu k'moy ha'etzem. Light is like the essence of the thing that it comes from. Okay, and then the Rebbe is going to explain the difference between or and shefa.
What was Makora?
Its source, like shorish, right? Makor, the source of something. Shorish is really, literally the root of something. Right? But we'll say it's the source. And I assume the word shorish is the root of the word source in English. I assume. Also French, same word, the source. I don't know what it is in Spanish, but it's probably something similar. In or, there's different levels of or. When the Rebbe talks about or ein sof, he's saying it's like the etzem. There's a level of or that is very much one with the source of it. And then there's a level of or, which the Rebbe is going to talk about in the brackets, that's obviously coming from its source, but the whole purpose of the or is that the recipient of the or can relate to the or and derive benefit from the or. That's generally when we differentiate between two levels of, that's called shefa, bounty, right? When a teacher teaches a student, he's not me'ir, he's not just shining light, he's mashpia, he's shining shefa, meaning what's he saying? What should he be saying? A level of his intellectual light that is commensurate to the intellectual abilities of the students listening to him talk, right? What could he theoretically do? Just be me'ir. What? Just reveal in the most unadulterated and powerful way his understanding of a particular topic. Okay. Now, who's he talking to? JSP. What do they understand? Nothing. Right? And I'm not picking on JSP. He's talking completely beyond them. He's just talking to the wall. Right? Why? Well, there is no way to put this in any context whatsoever. So what's he doing? He's revealing his essential understanding of this topic. Okay. If Rabbi Levinger is standing at the door, he'll understand what he's talking about. No one else will. Okay, and that might go for every class in Mayanot, right? Okay. So what should he do? Well, what does a teacher do? A teacher doesn't do that. A teacher. Some people do. Some people give lectures that way. Why do they give lectures that way? I assume the reason they're giving lectures that way is because the only thing they're interested in, they're interested in teaching the students one thing: how great they are, how brilliant they are and great they are. So they're showing their brilliance. They're not teaching any information to the student. Why? Because the student can't understand the information that this person is saying, because he's saying it in such a way that's completely beyond the intellectual capabilities of the student. Right? Okay. But everybody knows he's smart. Okay. Good. I guess that's something. That's called a me'ir. Just throws it up. Now there's some people who don't do that only for the cynical reason that I just gave. There's some people who just aren't able to bring it down, and they're just sort of meir, and you get whatever you can get. Okay, there are people like that, and they're not doing it so everybody will think they're great. They just can't bring it down lower. Okay, that's rare. What's a teacher? Interesting. What do we call a teacher in Lubavitcher? What do we call a teacher? We call him a mashpia. Why? Because what's the whole idea of the teacher is to take the light, the intellectual light that exists in his or her intellect, and reveal it in a way that's commensurate to the kelim, to the vessels of the intellect of the student. That means you're probably going to have to diminish the light a little bit and clothe it in different guises, like a mushal, right? That's what the Rebbe is doing for us, right? The Alter Rebbe gave us a mushal to understand something. He doesn't need a mushal of Melech Basada to understand what Elul is. He experiences Elul. You and I need a mushal of Melech Basada to understand what Elul is. So he gives us the mushal, brings it down to a level that you and I can understand. Okay, so he brings the light down and clothes it in mashalim. Okay, that's what God does about existence also. If God were to reveal existence as he has it, you and I wouldn't exist. If God reveals his existence in a way that you and I can somehow be a kli for the revelation of that level of existence, so then we do exist. Okay. That's why a mashpia is the mashal for how the Eibusher created the world. So there's something called shefa, and shefa is the light that is commensurate to the vessel in which it's about to be revealed and hopefully clothed. So the shefa will go into the brain of the student. The student will understand the idea. Over time, what will the student understand? More and more and more of the idea until he'll get to the point where he understands what was really going on in the head of his teacher way back. Or Ein Sof, what the Rebbe just talked about, Kel, unadulterated light. Just a revelation of what it is, not a revelation of what it is commensurate to the other. Just a revelation of it itself. That's Ein Sof. And that's why the Rebbe says that's Kel. That level of unbelievably powerful godly light that reveals in the most powerful way possible godliness. Now, there's a limitation to light by definition, because light is still not the source. Sunlight is still not sun. It's incredibly powerful, but it's still not sun. The sunlight you and I experience is not sunlight, it's really sun shefa, right? Because it's 93 million miles away. If you and I were to experience sunlight in all its power, well, we wouldn't experience that for very long, would we? Right? We'd be a piece of toast pretty quickly. Right? End of us. Okay. So, the light right next to the sun, however that works, so that light, that's Kel. Right? The light 93 million miles away, that's Shefa. That's sunlight that's been diminished just naturally by virtue of traveling through space for 93 million miles. That light has been diminished to the extent that it can be incorporated into the reality that it shines on and not obliterate it, but help it grow. So the grass will grow and the daffodils will grow, and if we sit out in it, might actually look healthy, right? Though we might not feel healthy or be healthy, but we'll look a little healthier because we'll have a little color in our face. Okay, fine. Right, it's perfect. Now, sometimes even here it's too hot. There's places on Earth where it's too hot, right? There's deserts, nothing can grow there, and if you go hang out there, you're not going to last very long. Okay, there's also places where, for whatever reason, it's all angle, which I just don't understand, but okay, 93 million miles, how much should angle matter? But it does, right? If you go hang out on the North Pole or the South Pole, well, it's going to be a beautiful sunny day, take off your clothes and get a nice tan, right? You'll be an ice cube in about 4 minutes. Yeah, 4 minutes or less than that, right? Okay, why? I don't know. Sunny day. It's that story of the student from California went to school in Oregon and woke up one November morning, sun shining, put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and went out for a run and froze. Couldn't figure out why the sun doesn't work up here, right? Same day in California, same minute in California, 500 miles south. It's warm as can be. Up there in northern Oregon, the guy's freezing. How does that work? Same sun. Exactly the same sun, same time zone, right? Everything's exactly the same. Angle. Okay, but the sun shines down here just perfectly for Earth. Works just fine, even in Oregon. And that's Kel. Kel is not the sun shining in Oregon. Kel is the sun shining, so to speak, immediately outside the sun, the sunlight. Kel avaya v'yarlanet. The or, hu kamaya etzem. Or is similar to its source, to its essence. Now it isn't the etzem. We spend a great deal of time differentiating between the essence of God and his revealed light. Because one is we talked about this earlier, one is the one thing that must exist. It's called mechuyev hametzius. It can't not be. Whereas light doesn't have to exist. Light exists because God wants it to. Could there not be godly light? Yes. God did decide he doesn't want to radiate. There's no problem. Do whatever he wants. Okay, but he wants there to be something called godly light. And the most powerful expression of that is called kel. And now the Rebbe says in brackets, and that kel is kamaya etzem, and that's why you and I, in all fairness, light in general, even though you and I are experiencing the shefa of the sun, so to speak, and not as much its light, it's still very bright down here, and you shouldn't look at it straight, and on a sunny day you wear sunglasses, etc., as far away as it is. But you also, interestingly enough, don't differentiate between the light and its source, and that's why you will say, and we've talked about this many times, that's why you will say, boy, the sun's bright today. Well, now, if you think about that seriously, that's a very silly thing to say. The sun is bright today. What does that mean? The sun's probably always bright and probably always hot. Boy, the sun's hot today. No, it's a hot sun today. Hot sun today? The temperature of the sun went up? No, the temperature of the sun is whatever it is up there. It must be some, temperature that's like beyond understanding. Okay, it's a few more than 37 degrees Celsius up there. Okay, so down here you go, the sun's hot. But what you really mean is what? That the sunlight 93 million miles away from the sun is really hot today. But you don't differentiate between the sun and the light because that's the nature of light. It's all about revealing its source. So it's just one with its source. And that's even relevant to Shefa on a certain level. But all the more so, the most powerful expression of the light. So that's why the Rebbe says is Kamaya Etzem. It's not the Etzem. It's not the essence. It's not the source. But it's so much like it that it's almost indistinguishable. Therefore, relative to us, to say it in simple terms, an unbelievably powerful level of godly reality. Kel. As is explained in a number of places, achiluk, the difference between or l'shefa, which is what we talked about. The shefa, bounty, hu shahamashpia, the one who's eliciting this bounty, mitzamsem atzmei, limits himself, lefi erech hamakabel, in accordance with the receiver, right? The Rebbe is explaining this idea in such a way that you and I can understand it. When the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe discuss this together, I don't imagine the Rebbe has to use all these words. Right? Okay. V'or hu me'ein ha'ma'or. And the or is like the luminary. It's just a revelation of, so in terms of the teacher, it's just a revelation of all of the power of the intellect of the teacher in a completely unadulterated form. It's just a revelation. What was inside is now revealed outside. So, no tzimtzum. Now, it's still not inside, it's still outside. There's still a difference. Okay, Seder, but it's it. Ubechol echad miYisrael, and in every single Jew, meir gilu izeh. And not only in Elul, always. Elul is just a time when it comes into a state of revelation. The king is always the king, just sometimes he's in the field. But the king's the king. This level of godly light shines in every single Jew. V'yasei, not only does it shine in every single one of us, but rather, shagilui, the Shem Kel, this revelation of Shem Kel, this unbelievably powerful godly light, shebekol echad miYisrael, that's in every single Jew, who hasar is the minister, v'meishel, and the governor, that which rules them, shebekirbai. It's truly who they are, and the most powerful part of them. Why? The word Yisrael, what does it mean? The word Yisrael, who, oisius yud, which is a state of constancy, sar kel, that your minister, your most powerful governing power is kel, this level of incredibly powerful godliness. Every single one of us. That's who we really are. Elul, the king comes in the field and brings about an appreciation of that in every one of us. Okay, Beseder, but that's an existential reality of every single Jew. V'zeu, and that's why Shabitel Elokusha B'Kol Echad Yisrael, the state of, now bittul is usually called nullification, but nullification doesn't mean you're a nothing and you just sit there and drool all day. Bittul means that you've rid yourself of all of those things that are stopping the expression of who you really are. That's bittul. Right? I mean, bittul is the revelation of who you really are, not the nullification of who you really are. Because what are you being mevatel? External reality to allow internal reality to shine through. Bittul is an incredibly misunderstood concept. It's also very, very hard to translate. Nullification, cancellation, it's all sort of negative. It's negative words. Right? But what's being buttle? External you. What does that allow for? The revelation of internal you. Right? So in terms of your relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, what's bittul? Bittul is doing away with all of that reality which might interfere with your natural connection to godliness. So that's what Rebbe explaining here. Right? The bittul of a Jew's connection to Elokus. Now, also being bottled, what does it mean to be, again, bottled Elokus? What does that mean? That means that you're, sometimes we talk about in terms of agenda. What's your agenda, Elokus? The person who's bottled, what's their agenda? The Eibishter. That's their agenda. They walk into a room, what are they interested in? That the people in the room should develop a more sophisticated relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, because that's good for them, and that's good for the world, and that's good for God, because that's what God wants. Okay, that's their agenda. Right? A yesh walks into the room. What's his agenda? That the people in the room should think he's whatever adjective is relevant to the people in the room. If there are a bunch of intellects in the room, so they should all think he's a great intellect. If there are a bunch of musicians in the room, then he wants them all to think that he's a great musician. If there's a bunch of artists, he's a great artist. If there's a bunch of woke people, that he's the wokest. If there's a bunch of Republicans, he's the most Republican. If there's a bunch of, whatever it is, he wants them to think that he's the coolest. Now, what's cool? Well, it depends what room he walks into, right? You walk into a room of woke people, being a Republican is not cool. You walk into a room of a Republican, being woke isn't cool. Okay, Beseder. So he's got to pick and choose, got to figure out, what crowd is he playing here? Because it's all just the me show. That's the most powerful expression of Yeshus. The opposite of Bittul. What's his agenda? Himself. Right? Okay. Now that can be, excessive and just impossible to deal with. There's people like that who are just, you can't, it's hard to be around them. You don't have to find them impressive because they're so impressed by themselves. They fulfill that obligation for everybody, right? They're like matesy everybody and being impressed by them, so you don't have to be impressed by them. He's so impressed by himself. He's matesy you too. Like he made Kiddush for you. It's not a problem. Right? Okay, there's people like that. So that's just Yeshus. That's what we call in Chassidus, we call it Yeshus. Okay.
Yesh? Like in this?
Being, the opposite of Bittul. Bittul is nullification. Yesh is literally Yesh. There is being. But in this sense, it's an incredible, an overblown sense of self. Now, Bittul isn't the denial of self. It's ultimately the revelation of true self. It's the denial of untrue self, which is the Nefesh Habahamis, in order to allow the Nefesh Elokis to shine through, because that's who I really am. I consciously am aware of myself in terms of my Nefesh Habahamis. But can conscious me come to the appreciation of, okay, the Beseder, but that's an external expression. What's really going on is I'm just this little piece of Elokus walking around in Elam Hazeh. Oh, I can talk about that conceptually and intellectually. I get that. Do I experience that and live that? Ooh, that's harder. Okay, the more I do, the more I'm in a state of bittul, and the less I'm in a state of what you and I would call yesh. Right? How much is the person experiencing godliness in their life, and how much are they experiencing self? Self tends, it's not like I have to explain this to any of us. We've all got a PhD in self. Right? Self makes a lot of noise in our lives. Right? There's this person just making non-stop noise in my head. It's the person I call I. Would you just be quiet for a minute? Just shut. Right? Go to sleep and let me live, because you're just trying to take over my life. Right? Okay. Well, if we let him, he'll take over our lives, and we'll end up just living a completely frivolous, unimportant life, involved in things that have no real meaning, because it'll all just about be me feeling good. I just want to feel good. Right? So what am I going to do? I don't know. Now that person might do real work to get to that point, but it's still about me just feeling good. Or they'll take the shortcut, drugs and alcohol. Right? Shortcut, bad shortcut, terrible, long-term, terrible results, long-term. Short-term, works like a charm. It's very good short-term, no doubt about that. That's why people like it. Just very bad long-term, just a disaster long-term. Completely destroys the person. Okay. But, when you're 20 and invincible, like, who cares? So the true being of every single one of us is this level of kel. In other words, a very, very powerful godly level. And that's why the bittul elokusha b'kol echad Yisrael, our natural desire, which might be buried, but it doesn't mean it's not there. Our natural desire to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to express Him in our lives, hu bittul shelamayla mitam v'das. It's ultimately something that's super rational. That's why it sometimes will express itself in situations that don't make sense. You might say to a person, well, really, like you should, Mesiras Nefesh. Well, I don't understand. Why are you giving up your life to keep Shabbos? If you don't give up your life to keep Shabbos, you could keep Shabbos for the next 40 years. Okay, that makes sense. But the Jew will give up his life to keep Shabbos because he just can't, there's no such thing. I can't do that. That's the story of the Jewish people for the last 2,000 years in Golus. Completely l'mayla mitam v'das. Because rationally, it would be reasonable to go, figure out some way of the long-term gain. But that's not how we relate to it. Right now, can I completely and totally disconnect from the Eibishter? No. Right? That, in terms of the essence of the Jew, that's like saying, I'll let you live if you let me cut off your head. Well, that's not a very reasonable equation, right? Because I can't really live without my head, can I? Okay. For a Jew, that's exactly the same as I'll let you live if you're Machal Shabbos in public. There's no such thing. It's like saying cut off my head, let me live. No, that can't be. That's the opposite of life. And unfortunately, our history is full of people expressing that in such a... it's amazing, but it's also unfortunate because we'd rather live for Yiddishkeit than have to die for it. Ki b'Yisrael u'gilia or ein sof baruch hu atzmei mamish, because in Yisrael there is a revelation of God, infinite godly light itself, mamish, shelamayla mishtalshelus, beyond... Hishtalshelus means the four worlds. In other words, beyond the orderly level of revelation of godly light, such that it undergoes tzimtzum achar tzimtzum, diminishing after diminishing, until it can be clothed in vessels and allow for the finite existence of this cup. What's ultimately giving this cup its existence? God. Is God finite? No. Can he be clothed in finite? Yes. Why? Because he's beyond infinite and beyond finite, so he can allow himself to be clothed in finite. And the level of godly light that's clothed in this thing, giving its existence, is called or mimale, light that fills, which we've all learned about or will learn about. Okay. So there's that level of godly light, right? Kel is so far beyond that. No tzimtzum whatsoever, no diminishing whatsoever. Let's see if we can finish the paragraph in 2 minutes, and I'm going to run out the door to go get my blood test, which is very exciting. So what happens in Elul? Now the Rebbe is explaining all this in Pnimius. The king's in the field, very nice. What does that mean? There's a revelation of the Yud Gimel Midas Rachim Shabelo. There's a revelation of Kel. Shireishisan u'Makeran, that their beginning and their source, v'chlalusan, and their general reality, hu Kel. Misarer, it's aroused, u'mizgala, and revealed, bechinas Kel, the quality of Kel, sheb'kol echad Yisrael, that's in every single Jew. Rebbe's going to explain this more, so let's just see it, and then tomorrow we'll see more. The Zeo Shaved Elul, and that, now the Rebbe says something astounding. That's why the Aveda of Elul, Ani L'Dodi. Ani L'Dodi. What did the Rebbe just say? What's revealed in Elul? Who Ani really is. Right? That's what's revealed in Elul. Therefore what? Once Ani, the real Ani, is revealed, where do I go? What am I interested in? What do I care about? Doidi. All I care about is doidi. If you reveal the Ani Amiti, L'Doidi, I don't have to do anything. That's just natural. Right? Elul, the Rebbe says, is the revelation of who we really are. Now I have to tap into that. That's the hard part. Okay, but it's there. It's there for the taking. Ki agili shelamayla. I'm sorry. V'zeu shaved elu he ani l'dodi. Af, second line, last line. Sheis erus he, even though these erus al yedei gilui l'milamayla, even though the revelation is from the arousal, I'm sorry, is from a revelation above. So why is it ani l'dodi? It seems to be doidi leave, ani loy. No, what's the ani l'dodi all about? We'll see why it's first. The Rebbe hasn't explained that. But what does ani l'dodi mean? Elul is the revelation of who ani really is. And then Mamela, consequently, I go to doidi. I mean, that's who I am. That's what I'm going to do. Right? Ki agilu shelamayla hu rak siba. The revelation from above is only a reason, a cause, shall yodem izgala ratzon apnimi dadam, that through it, it's revealed the true desire of a person. What's my ratzon amiti? Elokus. How is that revealed? The revelation of a level of elokus that is the true source of who I am down here. And once that's revealed, so then the natural response will be for me to want to connect to who I really am. Now, that still takes a further, right? Because we're still sitting here and might be saying to ourselves, well, what about, I don't feel that. Why not? Okay, we'll have to work on that too. But okay, I'm going to run very fast. Please don't ask me any questions. I have to run so someone can stick a needle in my arm. Oh, it's so much fun. Yeah, but they don't hurt. They really don't hurt. And it is interesting that how they learn how to put them in there and get what they want out of there. Because some